Welcome to Hope Moments. If you love captivating stories, you're in the right place. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. It truly means the world to us. Share this video with your friends and family, and turn on post notifications so you never miss an exciting news story. Now sit back, relax, and let's dive into today's story. The grand ballroom of the Lexington Manor shimmered under the glow of 100 crystal chandeliers, their golden light cascading over silk-draped tables and floral centerpieces, towering like sculptures. Every surface gleamed, marble floors polished to perfection, mirrors reflecting the opulence, and champagne glasses catching the glimmer of candlelight. The air carried a symphony of laughter, the clink of crystal, and the hum of a live jazz quartet playing a melody that felt as luxurious as the venue itself. At the center of it all stood Ethan Calloway, the man of the hour, clad in a custom-tailored Armani tuxedo. Every detail of his appearance was immaculate, from his perfectly styled dark hair to the way his cufflinks, golden lions, a symbol of his success, caught the light with each movement. This was his night, a grand celebration of wealth, power, and the next chapter of his life. His bride, Cassandra Monroe, was the embodiment of elegance. Her fitted gown, a creation from an exclusive Parisian designer, hugged her slender figure before flowing into a cascade of silk and lace. Diamonds glittered at her throat and ears, and her auburn hair was swept into an intricate updo that left her long, graceful neck bare. When she turned, her emerald green eyes sparkled with excitement as she greeted guests, her laughter warm and practiced. She was the perfect bride, poised, admired, untouchable. Ethan should have felt triumphant. This wedding was the culmination of everything he had worked for: a seat among the elite, a wife from one of the wealthiest families in the city, and a life most could only dream of. And yet, as he stood amidst the sea of luxury, something in him felt off. A whisper of unease slithered through his mind, impossible to ignore. He scanned the room, watching as senators, business moguls, and socialites sipped champagne from crystal flutes, their conversations filled with calculated charm. These were the people he had once admired, the ones he had spent years clawing his way up to stand beside. And yet, in this moment, they felt foreign, distant. Cassandra's laughter rang out as she conversed with the governor's wife, her smile radiant, her posture perfect. Ethan forced a smile as a guest clapped a hand on his shoulder, offering congratulations he'd barely registered. He should be soaking this in, reveling in his success, but instead his thoughts drifted back to the days before all of this, when life had been simpler. When he had been a man who dreamed, not a man who calculated. A waiter passed by, offering another round of champagne. Ethan reached for a glass, his fingers brushing the cool crystal, but he hesitated. His gaze flickered toward the far end of the room, where the catering staff moved in practiced efficiency. And then he saw her. At first, he thought his mind was playing tricks on him. She was turned away, stacking empty plates onto a tray, her movements deliberate but weary. A strand of chestnut hair had fallen from her bun, brushing against her cheek as she wiped the table with slow, practiced motions. Something about the curve of her jaw, the shape of her hands, it all felt too familiar. Lena Carter. His breath hitched. The sound of the ballroom faded, replaced by the pounding of his pulse in his ears. It couldn't be. Not here, not now. And then she turned. For a split second their eyes locked, a lifetime fit into that moment, the past rushing back in an overwhelming tide. Her hazel eyes, once filled with warmth and laughter, now held something else. Shock, resentment, pain. Ethan felt rooted to the spot, unable to move, unable to breathe. His grip on the champagne glass tightened as his mind scrambled for an explanation. What was she doing here? How could this be happening on his wedding day? Then, just as quickly as the moment had come, it was gone. Lena's expression hardened. Her fingers tightened around the tray she held, knuckles white with tension. She broke the eye contact first, turning away, disappearing into the crowd of servers like a ghost retreating into the shadows. Ethan exhaled sharply, his head spinning. He felt the weight of something unspoken pressing against his chest, suffocating. Lena Carter, his ex-wife, and she was pregnant. His stomach twisted into knots as his gaze flicked back toward the spot where she had been. She was gone, but the image of her remained burned into his mind. The soft swell of her belly, the tired set of her shoulders, the unmistakable weight of struggle on a woman who had once been so full of life. A cold sweat prickled at the back of his neck. Questions stormed through his mind like a relentless hurricane. Was she married? Engaged? Had she moved on? And, most pressing of all, whose child was she carrying? Ethan? Cassandra's voice snapped him back to the present. She had moved beside him, her delicate fingers curling around his arm, her smile still glowing for the guests who watched them. But as she glanced up at him, her brows furrowed ever so slightly. "Are you okay? You look pale." He swallowed hard, forcing his lips into the shape of a smile. "Yeah, just taking it all in." She squeezed his arm affectionately, oblivious to the chaos raging in his mind. "It's perfect, isn't it? Everything we wanted." Ethan forced a nod, but his chest felt tight, like he was trapped in a dream that had suddenly turned into a nightmare. He needed air. He needed answers. Most of all, he needed to find Lena. Ethan's heartbeat pounded in his ears as he pushed through the sea of elegantly dressed guests, his breath uneven. The grandeur of the ballroom, the glittering chandeliers, the polished marble, the laughter of the elite, faded into the background. All he could think about was Lena. He scanned the room, but she had disappeared, melting into the crowd of servers like smoke dissipating into the night. His hands curled into fists at his sides. He had to find her. He needed answers. Cassandra's delicate hand brushed against his forearm. "Ethan," she murmured, her voice thick with affection, "everyone's waiting for us to do the first dance." He blinked, as if suddenly remembering where he was. The weight of expectation pressed down on him, but his mind was elsewhere. The thought of Lena, of her being here, pregnant, consumed him. "I just need a moment," he said, forcing a tight smile. Before she could respond, he slipped away. Ethan weaved through the catering staff near the back of the ballroom, where servers in crisp white shirts and black aprons worked swiftly to clear tables. The air smelled of champagne and rich entrees, but all he noticed was the hollow sensation in his chest. Then, through the service entrance, he saw her. Lena stood near a stack of empty trays, her back to him. Her posture was stiff, her shoulders tense. Even though her uniform was plain and practical, it couldn't hide the curve of her belly. The realization that she was carrying a child, possibly his child, hit him like a freight train. He stepped closer, his voice low but firm. "Lena?" She flinched. Slowly, she turned to face him. Her hazel eyes, once so full of warmth, were unreadable now, guarded, cautious. Dark circles shadowed her face, signs of exhaustion she hadn't had years ago. And yet, beneath it all, she was still Lena, the woman who had once been his entire world. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them crackled with unspoken words, with memories neither dared to resurrect. Finally, she broke the silence. "You shouldn't be back here, Ethan." His jaw clenched. "And you shouldn't be here at all." His voice was rougher than he intended, but the emotions flooding through him were impossible to contain. "Why are you here? Why now?" She exhaled, shaking her head. "I'm working, Ethan. That's all there is to it." "That's not all there is to it," he countered, his gaze dropping to her belly. "How far along are you?" Her hand instinctively went to her stomach, as if shielding the child from his questions. "That's none of your business." His stomach twisted. "Like hell it isn't." Lena's expression hardened. "You lost the right to ask me anything the day you chose your career over our marriage." The words sliced through him, sharp and precise. He had told himself he had moved on, that their divorce had been inevitable. But standing here now, looking at her, he realized the past had never truly let him go. Ethan took a steadying breath, forcing himself to remain calm. "Is it mine?" Lena's lips parted, as if caught off guard by his directness. For the briefest moment, something flickered in her eyes, fear, pain. Then, just as quickly, she masked it. "You don't get to ask that," she said quietly. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I need to know, Lena." She shook her head, her fingers gripping the edge of the table behind her. "What difference would it make, Ethan? You have a new life now. A perfect life." His jaw tightened. "You think any of this feels perfect?" He gestured vaguely toward the opulent ballroom behind him. "You think I can stand in there and pretend nothing has changed when you're standing right here, pregnant, working as a server at my damn wedding?" Lena's breath hitched, but she lifted her chin, defiant. "You made your choice, Ethan, and I made mine." Silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. Ethan wanted to say something, anything to break it. But before he could, Lena glanced past him and stiffened. He followed her gaze and saw Cassandra standing a few feet away, watching them. Ethan felt a sharp pang of guilt. His fiancée's blue eyes flickered with confusion, concern, and something darker. She had seen enough to know that this wasn't just a casual conversation. "Ethan?" Cassandra's voice was soft, but there was a steel edge beneath it. "What's going on?" Lena took a step back, her expression unreadable once more. "Congratulations, Ethan," she murmured before turning on her heel and walking away. Ethan felt a desperate urge to go after her, to demand the answers he needed. But Cassandra's presence held him in place, her question still hanging between them. He swallowed hard, watching as Lena disappeared through the service exit. And just like that, she was gone again. But this time, he couldn't just let her go. Ethan stood motionless, his mind still reeling from the encounter. The service exit door swung shut behind Lena, leaving only the echo of her footsteps fading into the night. He could still see the way her fingers had trembled slightly as she clutched the edge of the table, the flash of raw emotion in her eyes before she masked it with steel-like resolve. Cassandra's presence beside him felt heavier now. He turned to her, taking in the way she stood, shoulders squared, lips pressed together, her sharp blue eyes fixed on him. Her perfectly manicured fingers curled slightly at her sides, as if restraining an outburst. "What was that about?" she asked, her voice carefully measured. Ethan swallowed, forcing himself to meet her gaze. He had always been a master of control, knowing exactly what to say, how to maneuver through any situation. But now, standing in the middle of his own wedding reception, confronted with a past he thought was buried, he found himself at a loss for words. "Just someone I used to know," he said, knowing full well how empty that sounded. Cassandra studied him for a moment, the flicker of suspicion in her gaze undeniable. Then, with a sharp breath, she shook her head, her expression shifting into something unreadable. "We have guests waiting, Ethan," she said, her voice cooler now. "Let's not keep them." She turned without another word, her gown flowing behind her as she strode back toward the ballroom. Ethan let out a slow breath, running a hand through his hair before forcing himself to follow. The rest of the evening was a blur. He moved through the reception as if on autopilot, smiling, nodding, shaking hands with guests who had no idea his entire world had just tilted off its axis. He felt Cassandra's eyes on him throughout the night, studying him, reading him in a way that unnerved him. She was too intelligent, too perceptive to let this go easily. But it wasn't Cassandra who occupied his thoughts. It was Lena. Every moment he had spent with her flooded back with relentless clarity. The way she had once laughed, uninhibited and full of life, her eyes lighting up with unfiltered joy. The way she had curled up against him on the couch during late-night conversations about their future, before his ambition had consumed everything. And now she was carrying a child. His child? The weight of that possibility made his chest feel tight, his pulse unsteady. He stole glances toward the service entrance, as if expecting her to reappear. But she didn't. She was gone, just like before. By the time the reception ended and Ethan and Cassandra left for their suite at the St. Regis, exhaustion pressed down on him, but sleep was impossible. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, while Cassandra slept soundly beside him. His mind kept circling back to Lena, to the look in her eyes when he had asked if the baby was his. She hadn't answered directly. That alone gnawed at him. If it weren't his, wouldn't she have said so immediately? Wouldn't she have denied it outright? Instead, she had deflected. That was an answer in itself. Ethan exhaled sharply, raking a hand through his hair. He couldn't just ignore this. He had to find out the truth. Carefully, he slipped out of bed, moving silently as he grabbed his phone and stepped onto the balcony. The city sprawled out below him, lights glittering like distant stars. He opened a browser, searching for catering companies that had staffed the event. It took some digging, but eventually he found the one responsible. His fingers hovered over the call button. It was late, too late to be calling anyone, but he didn't care. He needed to know where Lena was. He needed answers. Before he could overthink it, he dialed the number. A groggy voice answered on the other end. "Hello?" Ethan straightened, his tone crisp and authoritative. "I attended an event tonight that your company catered. I need to get in contact with one of your staff members, Lena Carter." There was a pause. "Sir, we don't give out employee information. I'll make it worth your while." His voice was sharp, edged with the impatience clawing at his insides. Another pause, then a resigned sigh. "Give me a minute." Ethan paced the balcony, his pulse pounding as he waited. A moment later, the voice returned. "She's not a regular employee. She was hired as a temp, but I have an address on file." Ethan closed his eyes briefly, relief and anxiety warring inside him. "Give it to me." After scribbling it down, he hung up, gripping the paper tightly. Lena wasn't just a memory anymore. She was here, in this city, living a reality he had never imagined, and he was going to find her. Ethan gripped the slip of paper tightly, the address burning into his palm like a brand. He had Lena's location now, an apartment complex on the outskirts of the city. It wasn't the kind of place he had ever imagined her living in. The thought of her struggling, of her carrying a child while working low-wage catering jobs, made his chest tighten with something uncomfortably close to guilt. He wasn't sure what he'd say when he saw her. Would she slam the door in his face? Would she even let him speak? He didn't know. But he had to go. The drive was long, the neon glow of city lights fading into dimly lit streets lined with cracked sidewalks and flickering street lamps. Ethan had never been to this part of town, never had a reason to. The roads felt different under his tires, rough and uneven, a stark contrast to the smooth, manicured streets he was used to. Finally, he pulled up in front of a modest, worn-down apartment building. The paint on the exterior was peeling, and a flickering overhead light buzzed near the entrance. His gut twisted at the sight. This was where Lena lived now? He killed the engine and sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. The weight of everything, his past mistakes, the uncertainty of what lay ahead, pressed down on him. Then, with a sharp exhale, he climbed out of the car and approached the building. The stairs creaked under his weight as he climbed to the second floor. Apartment 2B. He found it easily enough, his pulse quickening as he raised his hand to knock. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, just as he was about to knock again, the door cracked open. Lena stood there, her expression blank, but her eyes filled with something unreadable. She was in sweatpants and an oversized t-shirt, her hair loosely tied back, exhaustion lining her features. For a second, she just stared at him, as if unsure whether he was real or some apparition from her past. Ethan swallowed hard. "Lena." Her fingers tightened around the edge of the door. "How did you find me?" "I needed to see you." His voice was steady, but inside he was anything but calm. His gaze flickered downward, landing on the curve of her belly. Even beneath the loose fabric, he could tell she was further along than he had initially thought. Lena exhaled sharply, shaking her head. "Ethan, you shouldn't be here." He took a step closer, lowering his voice. "Is it mine?" A flicker of emotion crossed her face, pain, anger, something else he couldn't quite place. She hesitated for a fraction of a second, and that was all the confirmation he needed. His breath hitched. "Lena." "No," she cut him off, her voice suddenly sharp. "You don't get to do this. You don't get to show up after all this time and demand answers." Ethan felt like the air had been knocked out of him. I needed to know." She let out a bitter laugh. "Why? So you can ease your conscience? So you can go back to your perfect life with Cassandra and pretend this never happened?" His jaw clenched. "That's not fair." She folded her arms over her chest. "Isn't it? You made your choice, Ethan. You left, you built your empire, got your perfect fiancé, and now, what? You suddenly care?" Ethan ran a hand down his face, frustration boiling beneath his skin. "I didn't know, Lena. If I had." "You would have what?" she challenged. "Dropped everything? Given up your career? Please." Silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. He didn't have an answer for that, because he honestly didn't know what he would have done. He had convinced himself for so long that leaving their marriage behind had been the only way forward, that his success had come at a necessary cost. But standing here, looking at the life Lena had been left with, it didn't feel like success at all. Lena sighed, her shoulders sagging slightly. "Ethan, I don't need anything from you. I've been doing just fine without you." He wanted to argue, to tell her that fine didn't look like this. The tired eyes, the tiny, cramped apartment, the weight she was carrying alone. But he knew better than to push. Instead, he took a step back. "I don't want to walk away from this," he said, his voice quieter now. "Not again." Lena's expression softened for a fraction of a second before she caught herself. I don't know if I believe you. He nodded slowly. Then let me prove it. She hesitated, then sighed, rubbing a hand over her belly. I don't have the energy for this tonight, Ethan. He understood. He had dropped a bomb into her life, and she needed time to process it. Can I see you again? Lena exhaled, looking away for a moment before meeting his gaze again. We'll see. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. Ethan took one last look at her before stepping away. As he walked back to his car, the weight of everything settled onto his shoulders. This wasn't over, not by a long shot, and for the first time in years, he realized he didn't want it to be. Ethan drove aimlessly through the city streets, his mind tangled in a web of emotions he wasn't prepared for. The reality of Lena's pregnancy sat heavy in his chest, each heartbeat a reminder that he was standing at the edge of a life-altering truth. He had spent years convincing himself he had moved on, that his past with Lena was a chapter closed, and yet, here he was, unable to think about anything else. When he finally reached his penthouse, the night had settled into a quiet hum outside, the skyline of the city stretching endlessly before him. Cassandra was waiting in the living room, her arms crossed, her piercing blue eyes locked onto him the moment he stepped inside. You were gone a long time, she said, her voice calm but clipped. Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. I needed to clear my head. Cassandra studied him, her gaze sharp and calculating. Is that all? He hesitated for a moment too long. Her lips parted slightly, a quiet exhale escaping as realization dawned on her. It's about her, isn't it? Ethan met her eyes, something in him sinking. There was no point in denying it. Cassandra was too perceptive, and he was too drained to play the role of the composed fiancé tonight. I saw her, he admitted. Cassandra's jaw tightened, her posture stiffening. And, he hesitated, his throat tightening. She's pregnant. Silence filled the room, heavy and suffocating. Cassandra's expression remained unreadable for a few agonizing seconds before she let out a sharp breath and turned away, her hands gripping the back of the couch. I should have known, she murmured, more to herself than to him. Ethan took a cautious step forward. Cass, she held up a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. Don't, just don't. Her voice was quiet but firm. I need to think. He wanted to say something, anything, to ease the tension coiling between them, but the words wouldn't come. For the first time since their engagement, he saw something crack in Cassandra's carefully composed exterior. Without another word, she turned and disappeared into their bedroom, leaving Ethan alone with his thoughts. The next morning, Ethan found himself parked outside Lena's apartment complex again, gripping a cup of coffee he had picked up on the way. He wasn't even sure why he was here, what he expected from her. An argument? A conversation? Some kind of closure? But deep down, he knew. He wasn't looking for closure. He was looking for a way in. Taking a deep breath, he stepped out of the car and made his way up the familiar creaking stairs. He hesitated only briefly before knocking. A few moments passed before the door swung open. Lena stood there, blinking up at him in surprise, her hair damp as if she had just stepped out of the shower. She was dressed casually, leggings and a loose sweater, but there was something undeniably beautiful about her, something that made Ethan's pulse stutter. Her brows furrowed. Ethan? I brought coffee, he said, holding up the cup as if that explained everything. Lena exhaled, shaking her head. You can't just show up here. I know, he admitted, but I'm here anyway. She hesitated, then stepped back, allowing him inside. The apartment was still modest, but in the morning light, he noticed little touches of warmth. Soft blankets draped over the couch, a half-finished book on the coffee table, signs of a life she had built without him. She crossed her arms. What do you want, Ethan? He met her gaze, his voice steady. I want to be involved. Lena let out a bitter laugh. You don't get to say that now. You walked away years ago. You don't get to waltz back in just because it's convenient for you. It's not about convenience, he said, stepping closer. It's about doing what's right. She stared at him, something flickering in her hazel eyes. And what if I don't want you involved? Ethan swallowed hard, his fingers tightening around the coffee cup. Then tell me that. Look me in the eyes and tell me you don't want me here. Lena opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her throat bobbed as she swallowed hard. Finally, she exhaled, shaking her head. I don't know what I want. Ethan stepped closer, his voice gentler now. Then let me prove to you that I'm not the same man I was back then. She looked away, her expression unreadable. It's going to take more than words, Ethan. He nodded. I know. Silence stretched between them, thick with history and uncertainty. Finally, Lena sighed and took the coffee from his hand, her fingers brushing his for the briefest moment. Fine, she said quietly. You can start by not disappearing this time. Ethan exhaled, feeling something shift between them, something fragile but real. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a start. Ethan stood outside Lena's apartment building long after she had closed the door behind him. The early morning sun was beginning to creep over the horizon, casting a soft, golden hue over the quiet street. The encounter had left him rattled, uncertain about what lay ahead, but one thing was clear. Lena hadn't pushed him away entirely. That was something. By the time he returned to his penthouse, exhaustion clung to him like a second skin. He barely had time to step inside before Cassandra's voice sliced through the silence. You were with her again. Ethan turned, meeting her sharp gaze from across the living room. She stood in her silk robe, arms crossed tightly over her chest, her expression carefully composed, but he could see the hurt beneath it. He sighed, running a hand down his face. Cass, don't, she cut in, her voice unwavering. Don't feed me excuses. She took a step forward, her fingers curling slightly. Did you even plan on telling me? Ethan clenched his jaw. I don't know. Cassandra let out a sharp, bitter laugh. At least you're honest about that. She exhaled, shaking her head. I can't do this, Ethan. I can't pretend that everything is fine when it's not. A knot formed in his stomach. Cass, I didn't plan for any of this, but it happened, and now I have to figure out how to deal with it. Her lips pressed into a thin line. And where does that leave me? The question hung between them like a weight neither of them wanted to acknowledge. Cassandra had always been pragmatic, poised, but this was breaking her in a way Ethan had never seen before. I don't have an answer for that yet, he admitted quietly. She swallowed hard, nodding stiffly. Then I think you need to figure it out, soon. Without another word, she turned and walked down the hall, disappearing into their bedroom. The finality in her step sent an uneasy feeling through him. He wasn't sure how much time he had left before everything fell apart completely. Later that afternoon, Ethan found himself outside Lena's apartment again. This time, he came prepared, with a bag of groceries in one hand and an undeniable sense of determination weighing down on him. He knocked, and after a long pause, Lena opened the door. Her expression flickered with surprise before shifting to guarded skepticism. What are you doing here? She, arms crossed over her growing belly. Ethan lifted the grocery bag. You need to eat. Lena huffed, but there was something softer in her eyes as she stepped aside to let him in. He walked into the small apartment, noticing how sparse it was. No unnecessary luxuries, just essentials. She closed the door behind him. You don't have to do this. I know, he said, setting the bag on the counter. But I want to. Lena hesitated before reaching into the bag, pulling out a carton of orange juice. She stared at it for a moment, then glanced at him. I was craving this, Ethan smirked. Lucky guess. A beat of silence passed between them before she spoke again, her voice quieter now. I still don't know if I can trust you, Ethan. He met her gaze. I get that, and I don't expect it to happen overnight, but I'm not walking away from this. She exhaled, rubbing her belly absent-mindedly. I don't know what this is supposed to look like. Neither do I, Ethan admitted, but maybe we figure it out together. Lena studied him for a long moment before finally nodding. Okay, it wasn't a promise, but it was something. The days that followed were a blur of conflicting emotions. Ethan found himself juggling two worlds, one with Cassandra, where tension hung thick in the air like an impending storm, and another with Lena, where every moment felt like walking on eggshells, unsure of how much ground he was allowed to claim. Cassandra had withdrawn, speaking less, watching him more. Her once effortless poise now felt like a mask barely holding together. And Ethan? He felt trapped between two versions of himself, the man who had built a life with Cassandra and the man who couldn't turn his back on Lena and their unborn child. One evening, Cassandra finally confronted him. The city lights shimmered through their floor-to-ceiling windows, casting elongated shadows across the sleek, modern furniture of their penthouse. She stood by the kitchen island, a glass of wine in hand, her fingers tracing the rim absent-mindedly. "You're slipping away from me," she said, her voice calm but laced with something deeper, something raw. Ethan exhaled slowly, setting his whiskey glass down. "Cass, don't," she interrupted, lifting her gaze to meet his. Her blue eyes, usually so sharp and confident, now held something he wasn't used to seeing: vulnerability. "I need to know. Are you still here, Ethan? With me?" Silence filled the space between them, heavy and suffocating. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, his pulse hammering. "I don't have an easy answer to that." Her jaw clenched. "That's not good enough." He knew it wasn't. But how could he give her certainty when his own world was unraveling? When every time he closed his eyes, he saw Lena's guarded expression, felt the weight of his unborn child pressing on his conscience. Cassandra took a deep breath, as if studying herself. "I won't be second place, Ethan. If you can't give me all of you, then I'd rather have none of you." Her words hit like a gut punch. This was it, the moment where everything either shattered or held firm. And Ethan had no answer. The next morning, he found himself outside Lena's apartment again, coffee in one hand, determination in the other. He knocked, and when the door opened, he saw the faintest flicker of surprise in Lena's tired eyes. "You keep showing up," she said, crossing her arms. Ethan smirked slightly. "Told you I wasn't going anywhere," she sighed, stepping aside to let him in. The apartment was warmer this time, less of the tension from before, though uncertainty still lingered in the air. Lena sat on the couch, tucking the leg beneath her as she studied him. "Cassandra knows, doesn't she?" He nodded. "She does." "And?" Ethan exhaled. "It's complicated." Lena let out a quiet laugh, shaking her head. "That's an understatement." He leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. "I don't have all the answers, Lena, but I know I want to be here, with you for this baby." She watched him carefully, searching for cracks in his resolve. "And what happens when it gets hard, Ethan? When reality sets in?" He met her gaze, unwavering. "Then I keep showing up." Something in her expression softened, just a little. A tentative hope, a whisper of something neither of them dared name yet. For the first time, the road ahead didn't seem so impossible. The tension in Ethan's life grew thicker with each passing day. The weight of his choices pressed down on him like a vice, and no matter how hard he tried to maintain control, everything around him felt like it was slipping through his fingers. Cassandra had been distant. Though she continued to move through their shared spaces with the same effortless grace she always had, there was something missing now. The warmth between them had cooled into something brittle, fragile. He could feel it in the way she avoided his gaze, the way her voice no longer carried the same softness when she spoke his name. And yet, Lena was still hesitant. Despite his repeated efforts to prove his commitment, to show her he wasn't the same man who had once let her slip away, she kept a careful distance. She let him in, just enough to see the edges of her struggle, but never close enough to fully break down the walls she had built between them. One evening, Ethan found himself back at her apartment, a bag of takeout in his hand. It had become something of a habit now, bringing her food, checking in, staying just long enough to feel like he was a part of something real. Lena opened the door, arching an eyebrow as she glanced down at the bag. "You know I can feed myself, right?" Ethan smirked, stepping inside. "I know, but I also know you've been craving spicy noodles." She rolled her eyes, but the faintest smile tugged at the corners of her lips. "You really don't give up, do you?" "Not when it matters." They sat on the couch, the smell of warm food filling the small apartment. The television played softly in the background, but neither of them paid much attention to it. Ethan watched as Lena absent-mindedly ran a hand over her stomach, her expression softening. "Have you thought about names?" he asked, breaking the comfortable silence. She hesitated, then nodded. "A few." He leaned in slightly. "Care to share?" Lena exhaled, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. "I was thinking about Ava, if it's a girl, and maybe Caleb for a boy." Ethan let the names settle in his mind, tasting them like something foreign but familiar all at once. "Ava Calloway," he murmured, testing the sound of it. "Caleb Calloway." Lena's gaze flickered up to meet his. "I didn't say anything about last names." He met her stare head on. "I know, but I want to be part of this, Lena. Really part of it." She sighed, rubbing her temples. Ethan, this isn't just about you showing up now. It's about what happens months from now, years from now. He nodded. I get that, and I'm not running from it. Lena studied him for a long moment, searching his face for any sign of hesitation. Whatever she saw there must have been enough, because she finally exhaled, shaking her head. You're relentless. He grinned. Took you this long to figure that out? For the first time in a long while, she laughed. It was soft, hesitant, but real. And for Ethan, it was enough. While things with Lena were shifting, slowly, cautiously, his world with Cassandra was crumbling. Late that night, he returned to the penthouse, the weight of exhaustion dragging at his limbs. He stepped inside to find Cassandra sitting by the floor-to-ceiling windows, a glass of red wine in her hand, her silhouette illuminated by the glow of the city lights. She didn't turn when he entered. She simply took a slow sip, her fingers tightening around the stem of the glass. I take it you weren't working late, she finally said, her voice void of emotion. Ethan exhaled, running a hand through his hair. Cass? Don't, she interrupted, finally turning to face him. Her expression was unreadable, but the hurt in her eyes was unmistakable. I already know. His stomach twisted. Know what? Cassandra let out a soft, bitter laugh. Come on, Ethan. Do you really think I haven't noticed? The late nights, the excuses, the way you look when you come home like your mind is somewhere else entirely? Ethan swallowed hard. I never wanted to hurt you. But you did. She set her glass down, rising gracefully from her seat. And the worst part? I don't even think you meant to. I think you're just lost. He opened his mouth to speak, but she shook her head. I won't beg you to stay, but I need to know, are you already gone? The words lodged in his throat. He wanted to tell her that he wasn't, that he could fix this. But deep down he knew the answer. Cassandra's lips pressed into a thin line, as if she had already expected his silence. I see, she whispered. She walked past him, pausing only briefly before disappearing into their bedroom, the door clicking shut behind her. Ethan stood there in the quiet aftermath, staring at the empty space where she had been. And for the first time, he understood that no matter what happened next, no matter how hard he tried to hold on, his life had already begun to change in ways he couldn't undo. Ethan hadn't slept. The weight of everything pressed on his chest like an anchor, keeping him tethered to the past, to the mistakes, to the inevitable fallout of his choices. He sat in his car outside Lena's apartment as dawn painted the sky in muted shades of orange and purple. His fingers gripped the steering wheel, tension coiled in his muscles. He had lost control of everything. His relationship with Cassandra, the life he had meticulously built, and now, his own sense of certainty. Lena had given him a cautious opening, but he knew trust wasn't rebuilt overnight. He had to prove himself, not just to her, but to himself as well. Taking a deep breath, he grabbed the bag of breakfast he had picked up on the way and stepped out of the car. The apartment complex was quiet, save for the distant hum of early morning traffic. When he knocked, it took a minute before the door opened slightly, revealing Lena in pajama pants and an oversized sweater. Her eyes, still heavy with sleep, widened slightly at the sight of him. Ethan, she mumbled, rubbing her temple. It's barely 6. I brought food, he said, lifting the bag like a peace offering. Figured you probably didn't eat yet. She sighed, stepping aside to let him in. You really don't know when to quit, do you? He smirked. Not when it comes to things that matter. Lena shuffled to the small kitchen, pouring herself a glass of orange juice as Ethan set the food on the table. The apartment was quiet, save for the occasional creak of the wooden floor beneath their steps. I meant what I said before, Ethan murmured, watching as she unwrapped a breakfast sandwich. I'm not just showing up now because it's convenient. I want to be here. Lena chewed in silence for a moment before setting the sandwich down. Ethan, you have an entire life waiting for you. Your business, your fiancée, Cassandra and I. He hesitated, running a hand down his face. We're not in a good place. And honestly, I don't know if there's anything left to fix. Lena's brows furrowed slightly, but she didn't say anything right away. He could see the hesitation in her eyes, the fear of being someone's second choice again. I don't want you here because your life fell apart somewhere else, she said finally. I need to know that if you're staying, it's because you want this, not because it's the easier option. Ethan leaned forward, his voice steady. Lena, I have never seen this as the easier option, but it's the only one that feels right. She held his gaze for a long moment before exhaling softly, then, prove it. Later that day, Ethan returned to the penthouse for what felt like the last time. The space, once a symbol of everything he had worked for, now felt foreign, cold, as if it had already let him go. Cassandra was in the living room, a suitcase by her side. She looked up when he entered, her expression unreadable. "You're leaving," Ethan said, though it wasn't a question. She nodded, smoothing the front of her blouse. "I booked a hotel for now. I can't be here, Ethan. Not like this." He swallowed the lump in his throat. "Cass, I loved you," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Maybe I still do, but love isn't enough when you're already somewhere else in your heart." Ethan felt the sting of her words but didn't argue. He had spent too long pretending things could go back to the way they were. "I never wanted to hurt you," he whispered. Cassandra gave him a sad smile. "I know, but sometimes wanting isn't enough." She grabbed her suitcase and walked past him, pausing only for a second before she was gone. The door clicked shut, sealing the end of something that had once been so sure. By the time Ethan returned to Lena's apartment, he felt drained. His world had been uprooted in a matter of days, and yet, standing at her door, he didn't feel lost. Lena opened the door, taking one look at his face before stepping aside. "Rough day?" she asked softly. He let out a breath. "Something like that." She studied him for a moment before nodding toward the couch. "Come in. Stay as long as you need." And for the first time in a long time, Ethan felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The quiet inside Lena's apartment was different this time. Not tense, not filled with unspoken words hanging in the air like storm clouds, but something softer. Ethan sat on the couch, staring at his hands, while Lena moved around the kitchen, making tea. The scent of chamomile filled the small space, wrapping around him like a warmth he hadn't realized he needed. His body was heavy with exhaustion, but his mind was alert, processing everything that had happened. Cassandra was gone. His past life was unraveling, but instead of feeling lost, he felt free. Lena placed a steaming mug in front of him and sat down across from him at the small dining table. Her fingers wrapped around her own cup, absorbing the warmth. "So," she said, breaking the silence. "What now?" Ethan exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face before looking at her. "I don't know, but I know I don't want to disappear this time." Lena studied him carefully, her hazel eyes searching his face for any trace of hesitation. "That's not enough, Ethan," she said, her voice softer than before. "Showing up is a start, but it's not everything." He nodded. "I know, but I want to try." She took a sip of her tea, her expression unreadable. Trying means consistency. It means not just saying the right words, but following through. If you're here, you have to be here. No excuses, no slipping back into old habits. Ethan leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Lena, I know I've failed before, but I swear to you, I am not that man anymore." She exhaled slowly, setting her cup down. "Then prove it." The next few days were a delicate balance. Ethan spent more time at Lena's apartment, easing into a routine that felt foreign but strangely natural. He took her to doctor's appointments, listening intently as the OB/GYN explained each stage of the pregnancy. He learned things he had never thought to ask before, about baby kicks, cravings, and the changes in Lena's body that she both marveled at and struggled with. One afternoon, as they left the doctor's office, Lena sighed, placing a hand on her belly. "I swear this kid is training to be a kickboxer." Ethan chuckled, glancing at her. "That means they're strong." She smiled slightly, but there was a shadow of uncertainty in her expression. "It's scary, you know? Doing this alone." He stopped walking, turning to face her. "You're not alone, Lena." She looked at him for a long moment, as if trying to decide whether to believe him. Finally, she nodded. "We'll see." Despite the progress he was making with Lena, Ethan knew there was something unresolved. His career, the empire he had built, the loose ends he hadn't tied up. He couldn't just walk away from everything overnight. Late one evening, he sat in his car outside his office, staring up at the towering glass building that bore his name. For years, this had been his identity, his purpose. But now it felt like a prison he had willingly built around himself. His phone buzzed, a message from his business partner, Marcus. "Need to talk. Big decisions ahead. Can't avoid this forever." Ethan let out a slow breath. He knew Marcus was right. He had to make a choice, not just about his personal life, but about his future. He couldn't keep straddling both worlds. The next morning, Ethan walked into his office, feeling like a stranger in his own kingdom. Marcus was already there, leaning against the desk, arms crossed. "You look like hell," Marcus said, eyeing him. "Rough week?" Ethan let out a dry laugh. "You could say that." Marcus straightened. "Look, man, I get that your personal life is a mess right now, but we have investors breathing down our necks. They need to know where you stand." Ethan rubbed his temples. "I know, and I'm not walking away from my responsibilities, but I also can't keep running things the way I used to." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You thinking of stepping back?" Ethan exhaled. "Maybe, at least for a while. I need to focus on something bigger than just this." His business partner studied him for a long moment before nodding. "Then make it official. Take a leave. Figure out what you need to do, but don't leave us in limbo." Ethan appreciated Marcus's directness. It was what he needed to hear. "I'll make my decision soon," Marcus smirked. "Better sooner than later." Later that night, Ethan found himself back at Lena's apartment. She was curled up on the couch, a book in her lap, the soft glow of the lamp casting warm light over her features. She looked up when he entered, taking in his tired expression. "Tough day?" she asked. He let out a breath, loosening his tie. "You could say that." She shifted, making space for him on the couch. "Want to talk about it?" Ethan hesitated, then sat beside her. "I think I'm stepping away from the company, at least for now." Lena's eyebrows lifted. "That's big." He nodded. "Yeah, but I think it's the right thing to do." She was quiet for a moment, then reached for his hand, lacing her fingers with his. It was the first time she had willingly reached for him, and the gesture sent a warmth through his chest. "Maybe this is the start of something better," she murmured. Ethan squeezed her hand gently. "I hope so." As they sat there in the quiet, the weight of the past still lingered, but for the first time, the future didn't seem so uncertain. It seemed possible. Ethan woke to the soft hum of the city outside Lena's apartment window. The early morning light filtered through the thin curtains, casting a golden glow across the small living room where he had spent the night. He had fallen asleep on the couch, his body stiff from the unfamiliar space, but his mind, his heart felt clearer than it had in a long time. From the kitchen, the faint clinking of dishes and the quiet bubbling of coffee filled the air. The scent was warm and inviting, grounding him in the present. He sat up, running a hand through his disheveled hair, and glanced toward the kitchen, where Lena stood barefoot, wearing one of his old college sweatshirts over her growing belly. She turned when she noticed him stirring. "Morning. I made coffee." Ethan stretched, then stood, rubbing the sleep from his eyes as he walked toward her. "You didn't have to do that?" Lena shrugged, pouring him a cup. "You were here. Figured you'd need it." He took the mug, his fingers brushing against hers for the briefest moment. "Thanks." Lena leaned against the counter, watching him as he took a sip. "So, are you really stepping away from the company?" Ethan exhaled slowly, nodding. "Yeah, I had a meeting with Marcus yesterday. He understands. I need to take a break, Lena. I need to focus on this, on us." Her expression softened, but she remained cautious. "That's a big move, Ethan. You built that company from the ground up." "I did," he admitted. "But for the first time, I'm realizing that success means nothing if I lose the things that actually matter." Lena searched his face, her hazel eyes flickering with something he couldn't quite place. Hope, maybe, or fear of disappointment. She exhaled and looked down, running her hand gently over the swell of her stomach. "This isn't going to be easy." Ethan placed his coffee down and stepped closer. "I don't want easy. I want real. And I want to be here, with you." She looked up at him then, and for the first time in a long while, she didn't pull away. Later that day, Ethan packed up the last of his belongings from the penthouse. The space, once a symbol of everything he had worked for, now felt empty. Without Cassandra, without the life he had once envisioned, it was just a shell of what it used to be. Marcus had met him earlier to finalize the transition. "You sure about this?" he had asked, standing in the middle of the now sparsely furnished apartment. "Yeah," Ethan had said. "I am." Marcus had studied him for a long moment before nodding. "Then go build something worth holding on to." Now, as Ethan took one last look at the skyline view he had once coveted, he felt something shift inside him. He wasn't losing anything. He was choosing something better. Ethan arrived back at Lena's apartment with a single duffel bag slung over his shoulder. She opened the door, her brows lifting slightly at the sight of him. "That's all you're bringing?" He smirked. "Starting fresh. Figured I'd travel light." Lena stepped aside, letting him in. "Well, I hope you don't think you're moving in just yet." He chuckled, setting his bag down. "I wouldn't dream of rushing you. But I do want to be close." She exhaled, arms crossed as she studied him. "Ethan, this is going to take time. I need to trust that you're really in this." "I know," he said softly, "and I'll prove it, however long it takes." She looked at him for a long moment before nodding. "Then let's take it one step at a time." Ethan smiled, feeling for the first time in years that he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Thanks for watching. Where are you watching from? If you love this story, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more great stories like this one. Share this video with your friends and family so they can enjoy it too. Tell us in the comments below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. There's plenty more amazing stories waiting for you, so stick around and keep exploring. See you in the next videos.